and out of the nearest safety point as well. So, no further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Martin McKee, the CEO and founder of Texthelp. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith, and welcome to the session, and a really hugely warm welcome to Belfast. Thank you for coming to Belfast. And can I just, to give me an indication of where people are from, how many people here are from Northern Ireland? Good, few people. Anyone from US or Europe or anywhere else? Yeah? Few people, okay. It's good to understand who I'm speaking to. So my name's Martin McKay, and I'll be sharing 3 lessons educators can teach us about bringing disability inclusion into the mainstream. I should, for anyone who's visually impaired in the room, I'll kind of describe myself. I'm average height, average build, grey-haired, like this past 15 years. I used to, I just got grey way before my time. I've got blue glasses and, so that's me. That's essentially what people are looking at. I should probably give you a little bit of background about myself before I tell you what I've learned. So I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Texthelp, and we are a global inclusive technology company. We make software for people with dyslexia and other cognitive impairments and difficulties that make it difficult for people to read and write. We have about 350 staff now in 11 offices around the world. We've got staff here in Northern Ireland and also in England and Denmark and Norway and Sweden, and we have 100 people in the US where I'm going later on today, and also Australia. And as you can tell from my accent, I'm from here. We started the company here 26 or 27 years ago, and I think everyone who gets into the disability sector or to assistive technology has a reason, and I'll tell you my reason. When I was 12, my dad had a stroke, and it was a left brain stroke, so he lost his ability to use his right arm and his right leg, and also his speech. So he couldn't communicate at all, and he couldn't write. He used to be a teacher, used to be a science teacher, very driven, active guy, and that had a really profound impact on me. And I was always a bit of a geeky kid, always messing around with computers, and as soon as I was old enough, I started making software to help people like him communicate. So I started out doing stuff for people with strokes and motor neuron disease and cerebral palsy and all sorts of things like that. And so that's how I kind of got into this sector. And we're still doing this 26 years later. We make tools to help people understand and be understood. That's one of our kind of fundamental things. If people can't understand the world around them, then it's not easy for them, not pleasant for them. And if they can't express themselves and make their make themselves understood, it's also very difficult. So we've been working on that for a while. So far, we've reached 100 million people in the world. That we think we're only getting started. We want to try to reach 1 billion people by 2030, and that's going to mean kind of looking east for us and looking at Africa and Asia as continents to move into. So we've been doing this initially in the education sector. So we started out doing stuff in schools and then universities, also public and private and not-for-profit sectors as well, trying to make people's experiences more inclusive. And it really comes down to that understanding thing, trying to let people understand and be understood. And we really think that it's every organization's responsibility to make their educational establishment or their workplace easy for people to be in, easy to consume the information around them, and easy to kind of communicate and convey their knowledge or their desires. So we ended up getting into helping people with dyslexia, and I probably owe a bottle of wine to a lovely lady that I met at Glasgow College of Art who was responsible for students with disabilities. And she had one student with cerebral palsy, and I had all this single switch communication devices and the same sort of things that Stephen Hawking was using way back in the day. She had one student with cerebral palsy, and she had about 200 students with dyslexia, she said. That might have been an exaggeration, but dyslexic students do tend to get attracted to art institutions. And she said if I could help people with dyslexia, I could reach a lot more people, and there really weren't very many good tools around for dyslexic people. And I hadn't really thought about dyslexia as a disability at all. Didn't really know very much about it. This was before the internet, actually. That's how long ago it was. There was a thing called CompuServe. If anyone who's got the same colour of hair as me, there was a thing called CompuServe, and I got on there, researched dyslexia, and I met a guy online called Marshall Raskind, who was a PhD, did research into kids with learning difficulties, and he was at a centre called the Frostig Centre in Pasadena in California. And I went over there and met him, and he shared his research with me, and that research was the basis of a spell checker that we made for dyslexic people 25 years ago, and it's still, the core of that is still in our products today. And so I kind of started getting into helping people with dyslexia. My 20-year-old daughter has dyslexia, actually. I'm very proud to say she's just completed her second year of dentistry at Queen's. Is anyone here from Queen's? No? Queen's are doing it. You are? Really good job. Queen's are doing a really good job supporting dyslexic students. And I would say that education is way ahead of where workplace really needs to get to. And I think that's what I can bring my years and years and years of experience in the education space. And I think we can learn from education in the workplace. In education, teachers must advocate for kids in special education. If they see a kid who is slow at reading, they must advocate, and they'll check to see, does the kid have a vision impairment, does the kid have a colour blindness, does the kid have dyslexia, and then they'll find out what support the kid needs and get the kid support, and then the kid can be a good deal more independent and feel better about themselves once they understand what the issue is. And that doesn't happen in work. So there are a lot of people who are in this bucket. 15% of the world's population have a disability of some sort. I'm myself among them. When I take my glasses off, I can read that big text, but I can no longer read, right? And it's not an intelligence thing. It's just I don't have my assistive technology. So when I put this on, I'm back in the room and I can, collaborate with you all. 15 to 20% of people have some kind of neurodiversity, like dyslexia, autism, ADHD, and despite this, neurodiversity and disability is usually the forgotten piece in the diversity and inclusion agenda. If you speak to people about diversity and inclusion, very often race and gender are at the top of the list, but it's getting better. In 2016, 90% of companies said that they prioritized diversity and inclusion, and only 4% considered disability a diversity and inclusion initiative, believe it or not, in 2016. That's not that long ago. In 2018, 1 in 10 organizations said that they included neurodiversity in their people management practices, and just last year, we did some research and we found that 94% of the HR and diversity and inclusion professionals that we spoke to had established some neurodiversity and disability inclusion best practice. So that's good. We've a very long way to go. Diversity and inclusion is a big and complex area. 38% of people have race as their top priority, 25% gender, 16% socioeconomic background, disabilities 15%, and sexual orientation is 6%. So disabilities becoming a bigger part of diversity and inclusion, but still we would like it to be bigger. And as I said earlier, compared to workplace, schools and colleges and universities have really got their act together. And I think as organizations, we really need to make sure that we're creating environments that are accessible and inclusive and flexible to different ways of doing and thinking. And the education sector have been doing this. They've been legally compelled to do this and have done so, and it's just become normalized, which is great. So I'm going to try to share 3 things that I've learned that I think we can apply, take from education and apply to work. And so here we go. Here's what I've learned. Just to give you a little bit more context, because although I'm very local, I have spent 30 years in this space, and I've been on advisory boards for the US Department of Education and the Office of Special Education Programs. I've served on the board of the Assistive Technology Industry Association. I'm very lucky to have worked very closely with CAST, which is a Center for Applied Special Technology in Massachusetts, and it's an inclusive education think tank that's spun out of Harvard School of Education. So I have been exposed to a lot of very bright people, and all I can do is sort of bring that knowledge into the room, hopefully. So the first thing is, and this might be obvious, but to you guys, because of the sector that you're in, but not all disabilities are obvious. And people who have a cognitive impairment that impacts their ability to read or their memory very often just looks like everyone else. And guess what? In workplace, most people who can't read very well or have dyslexia are not very proud of it. And when they were in education, they were probably stuck in special education and labelled as stupid, and that probably didn't feel good, and they don't want to be seen as stupid in the workplace. And now that they're in the workplace, they probably regard telling people that they've got dyslexia as a career-limiting move. This is really important. 12% of kids are in special education. Probably 8% of those kids are diagnosed with dyslexia. And they don't leave dyslexia behind when they leave school. They take it with them into the workplace. And in school, we have special education. And I think in workplace, we need to have special work. We need to make sure that people who have dyslexia feel welcomed and supported. And so that's part of our mission at Texthelp, is to make workplaces more inclusive and in how they think and feel and act about their neurodiverse workforce. So on the screen here is a picture of a guy called Colin, who works in the civil service. By the way, for anyone who is either online or wants to catch up on this stuff later on, I've put an accessible version of this slide deck online at text.help/Harkin. And you can download the slide deck, and there's alternate text and all that sort of stuff. But this is just a slide with a picture of a guy wearing glasses, and his name is Colin. There's a civil service logo. That's his employer. And do you know, Colin's dyslexic. He ended up getting promoted in the civil service into a role where he needed to do a lot of reading and writing, and he couldn't. He was really struggling with it, and he almost got fired. He wasn't stupid. He was dyslexic, and thankfully his manager had some experience of dyslexia, and she suggested they have an assessment, and the occupational health team got him some software to use. This is very, very common experience. If you think about it, 8% of the workforce is probably in this situation. I was talking to a young lady at EY 2 weeks ago, and EY are really good, very inclusive employer, but when I was talking to her and I told her about my job, and she kind of went all quiet and disclosed to me, she said, I'm dyslexic. And she said, you know what, it's a nightmare for me. Before I send an email, I have to copy it into Microsoft Word and spell check it there, and then I copy it into Grammarly and I spell check it there, and then I copy it into Google Docs and I spell check it there.
Sorry, Martin, the slides just aren't moving. If you
Oh, sorry.
Is that okay?
Do you know what? You guys have missed all these slides. I've been advancing them on one screen and not the other. Sorry, this is Colin.
I was just looking for Colin.
If I don't advance a slide, someone throw something at me.
We're all being very polite.
Great, okay. Don't be polite, just throw something at me. Yeah, so let me see, where am I at here? I need to get back synchronized up. Yeah, so this is Colin. So I was talking to this young lady at EY, and yeah, she said that she had to paste her text from 3 spell checkers before she sent it, because she was worried about sending bad spelling, kind of emails around the place. She's really brilliant, but she was just afraid of disclosing it. So as employers, you just need to know that these people are there in your workforce, and you got to get some stuff available for them to make life a little bit easier. It's like super inexpensive to do. It's like cheaper than a cup of coffee for them, and it's absolutely the right thing to do. It's okay for people like Richard Branson to disclose that they're dyslexic after they've made £1 billion, but not everyone can be like Richard Branson. And like everything, there's a bell curve, and there are exceptionally bright dyslexic people, and there are just regular dyslexic people, and we need to support them all. And it's great that there are super bright dyslexic people, but we need to support them all. So I'm now going to synchronously move 2 slides forward. So we don't want dyslexic people to be fearful of being fired, and we really need to make workplaces somewhere where employees are supported right from the start. I really want to create a space where employees feel comfortable, and like Senator Harkin said today, confident to be themselves. My daughter has the confidence to work really hard because she feels supported. and she gets some extra time in exams, which she really enjoys. The lectures at Queen's are now recorded, and for all students, they just record all lectures, and that's really good. I'll talk about that later. And yeah, so those are the sort of things that we need to be doing. So having tools, and I think it's really important, the learning here is people won't self-advocate, they won't put their hand up, and they're going to be sitting in work being fearful of and not able to do their best work. So I think making time and space for employees to share their challenges, and having HR people provide opportunities to discuss neurodiversity. Ideally, this should happen pre-hiring, so during the recruitment phase, let applicants know that you're a dyslexia-friendly organisation and make sure that tools are available. So that's like lesson one. Not all disabilities are obvious, and we need to think about neurodiverse employees. And that should start before they sign their contract. So lesson two, this is I love this one, universal design. So this is a mindset, and the workplace should really be a space where great things can happen for everybody. And universal design is a term that comes from architecture. And at Texthelp, we try to make that apply to people's experience of computing. So we try to do universal design in our software experience. And in the learning environment, what we've learned about in education is universal design for learning. So on the screen now is a photograph of a set of stairs, actually with no handrails, super steep, and it just goes up and up forever. And it is not a universally designed staircase. Wheelchair users would certainly struggle from an accessibility point of view. And we try to use this lens when we're looking at the learning experience. So if you struggle with reading, this is what a page of text can look like. Or if you've got employees that struggle with reading, this is what your staff handbook can look like, or your whatever piece of communication is going out from, from the CEO that month. And it's just to kind of bear in mind that that's what it can feel like for people, but what it can be like with a little bit of thought is like on the screen now. So to describe this, this is a set of stairs. I think it's in Toronto, outside a bank. And in the stair design, there is a ramp that kind of zigzags up through the stairway. And it's architecturally really nice, and it allows wheelchair users to access the area, and they feel like they're part of the design. It's not like off to the side. It's not like an afterthought that's been attached to the side of the building. It was conceived of during the design phase of the steps, and the ramp kind of zigzags up through the middle of it all. And also, really useful for fathers with buggies. I almost said mothers and reinforced the stereotype. Fathers with buggies, me with a wheelie suitcase, ramps are just generally useful things. And what we try to do is make our software experience like that. So in the education sector, we have this concept called universal design for learning. And the idea is that the barrier exists in the learning materials, not in the person. The limitation exists in the learning materials. So we have this framework, and we try to, I'm just going to advance a couple more slides here. So the principles of universal design for learning are multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of expression. What this really means is, from an accessibility perspective, from an engagement perspective, you could allow people to change the font, or the color of the font, or the size of the font to make it easier for them to engage with. And from a representation, side of things as well, give the information in a way that really try to make it so that everyone can understand it. So in education, there's a product called Newsella. So for anyone in the US, you'll know ELA is English Language Arts, which is kind of like English, what we call English here. And Newsella is it's a news service for kids, and it's today's news, but every news article is written at 5 different reading ages. And that means that if a teacher wants to have a lesson around a piece of current affairs, the whole class can engage with it. Like the super advanced kids and the kids who are struggling with reading, they can all engage with the same content. And from an expression perspective, dyslexic kids typically have bad handwriting. It might be just allowing them to hand in typed work rather than handwritten work. Or it could be making them a video, allow them to make a video or turn in some audio. In history class and geography class, we're not assessing writing, we're assessing their knowledge of history or geography, or their opinions on history or geography. We're not assessing their writing. We shouldn't think about limiting kids' ability to express themselves by something that they're difficult at. We're a conversational species, and the reading and writing thing has only emerged this past couple of 100 years, so we should allow people to lean on the stuff that we're evolved for. So what about universal design at work? I just want to plant a seed here. The average reading age in the UK is 9. When you write your employee handbook, is it written for a 9-year-old? Is your website written for a 9-year-old? Virgin Airlines, if you fly with Virgin Airlines, have you experienced it's this really easy to read, like low reading age content. The voiceover in the plane when you're getting the safety demonstration is fun, simple text. They don't use jargon. And so that is probably because they've got a dyslexic person at the top of the tree saying, I don't like that, that was really hard to consume. And so think about that from like universal design at work. What can we do to make our workplaces a little bit better? And I'm going to show you something now very quickly, which is to try to make this real, how we've used universal design to transform or change how a piece of math software works. Okay, so this is like a math tools for students built on UDL principles. So on the screen now, so how many of you today have used word prediction? So you've typed some letters into your phone and your phone has completed a word? Probably most of you. Who's not sent a text? Yeah, most people. So we've done this for math. So on the screen now, there's a picture of a computer screen, and there's someone typing into it, and they type in they type in like QUA, and it'll predict quadratic formula, and it'll do all the complicated typing for them and give them the math notation. And even if people don't spell well, if they want to type Pythagoras theorem and they start typing it PIE, because it sounds like pi, we'll recognize that and we'll show Pythagoras theorem. So this is an example of, making it so that someone with one finger typing in plain English can enter really complex mathematical notation. So that's an example of expression, giving people a different way to express their math knowledge. The next thing that we did with it was to allow people to do handwriting recognition. So on the screen now is another picture of a computer screen. And in the bottom half of the screen, you can see handwriting appearing. And it's the student using a touchscreen computer, and they're writing on the screen. And the problem about writing on the screen, and teachers like taking a photograph of a math worksheet and sending it to students as a PDF file, is a percentage of those kids are going to be visually impaired, and they need a screen reader. And a screen reader can't read a photograph of handwritten math particularly well. In fact, very often not at all remotely. So one of the things that this does, it allows people to write in kind of scrawly handwriting on the screen, and on the right-hand side of the screen you can see math notation appearing, and it's nice and crispy, typeset math, and it's also accessible, so that whenever the student turns this work in, it's also accessible. And it's a nice, easy thing to do. For people who are comfortable with the written notation, it's super easy. Speech input as well. We also on the screen now is a picture of actually a computer screen, and there's just like math appearing on it, but that's because someone is actually speaking to the computer, and we're recognizing the spoken math and turning it into accessible math. And so it's really good for students who have motion and dexterity issues, who can't manage even to type with one finger. It's also really good for people who can't be bothered to type, because there's a good percentage of those people around. And the last screen I've got here is, so this is a picture of actually a laptop, but there's a symbol of it showing a phone beside it. And not every kid has got a touchscreen computer, but almost every kid has a phone. And that phone has got a touchscreen, and it's got a microphone, and it's all these other cool things in it. So we put their phone to work. And so now kids who need to make accessible math appear, or to express their math knowledge, they can just finger write the math on their phone and press the squirt button, and it squirts it into the computer, and it just appears in the word processor. And I use the word squirt, but that's kind of what it looks like. They press a button on their phone, and it just appears inside their word processor. And that's a really good example of, I think, universal design, because we set about trying to solve problems for people who had cognitive impairment or motion and dexterity issues, and who had to do math. So, but you know what? Everyone loves that, because who here has had to ever type a math equation into a computer? What was that like for you? Horrible, isn't it? Right. Right, so it's a horrible experience, and what we did was we revisited that experience and we said, well, how can we make this good for visually impaired kids? How can we make this good for kids with cognitive impairment? How can we make this good for kids with motion and dexterity issues? Guess what? Everyone loves it, because they don't have to wrestle with that horrible equation editor anymore. They just type in plain English. So we've got 3 million people using this now, and it's been really very, very useful. So that's kind of the basis of universal design. And you know, it's like really take a hard look at your processes and your systems and say, what can we do to make this easier for everyone? And I don't mean accessible, because you can make something accessible and pass the WCAG, you know, AA or AAA guidelines, and the user experience can still be really horrible. It's what can you do to make it super easy?
Just a couple more minutes, Martin, is that okay?
Yep, absolutely. And so lesson number 3 is, when you do disability inclusion properly, it's brilliant for everybody. And so if you think about closed captions, so there are captions come up on the screen here today. When closed captions became law in Senator Harkin's piece of legislation, media producers thought it was going to be horrible and it was going to add to the cost of their events. Look at that happening over there now. So this has been captioned automatically, and it's really quite good. I have a crappy, fast Northern Ireland accent, and it's still doing a really, really good job. And 100 studies have shown that when people who are not, and by the way, largest group of caption users are not hearing impaired users. They're people in airports. Second largest group, people in sports bars. Third largest group, people trying to not wake their partner up. Only 18% of people who use captions are hearing impaired. They're broadly used, and 100 studies have shown that when people use captions, their comprehension is elevated. So there's a really good example of a disability thing that's being used for everyone. And there's loads and loads of things, like speech input was originally designed to help people who were seriously kind of motion impaired to type, and it's everywhere now. It's in Alexa. Books for the blind, recording books for the blind, Audible, right? Design it properly for everyone. And what happens is, instead of having to wait a month for one book to be narrated by a non-expert and cost a fortune, you end up with, you know, probably 3/4 of the books on Amazon being narrated by a subject matter expert who is a professional narrator, and you just end up getting good stuff for everyone. And word prediction was originally designed for people with profound motion and dexterity and communication difficulties, and all of you in the room have used it today. So the things that are kind of assistive technology today are just going to be for everyone tomorrow. That's essentially that. And I think that, you know, I'm just going to skip past here and show you a video.
My mission is to make sure that students know education is the key to unlock the doors for them, whether it is their career, going to school, college, high school, becoming families and parents, you know, just having access and not limiting them to what they see day to day right now, but knowing that education is going to soar them into the world. If you have a tool that can say, I can still be your best employee, I just need a little help with how I become your best employee, to have a tool like this is going to be amazing, because now you're not just looking for the top 20% that graduates from college or graduates from high school, because those children will have an opportunity, or those adults will have an opportunity now to still be able to be the best employee with a little support.
So that's a lady from Cincinnati High School. Her name is Shauna, and she's the principal of Pleasant Hill Academy. And she is a great advocate for the employers in her area, because the kids who go through their school system have access to these tools, but when they go into the workforce, she's an advocate for local employers getting the software in so that they can continue to be independent. And that's it. And I'm very happy to take questions, or we've probably got about 2 minutes.
Yeah, do you?
Anyone got any
Is there
questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So typically the employer pays for it because, well, so the software that we provide is actually for really high incidence and relatively low impact. So a lot of times, like workplace accommodations can be very expensive because you have to physically modify a building sometimes if it's an old building and so on. This is really inexpensive, and in our experience, companies will just pay for it rather than applying for a grant to pay for it because it is really inexpensive. It works out about $1 per employee per month. So it's very inexpensive. So, and in the UK there is there's a grant called Access to Work, and so if you need an accommodation, typically the Access to Work grant will pay for it, and about 5,000 people a month probably avail of this through Access to Work in the UK. It's really quite different in different countries. We have 7 people in Brisbane, and we tend to start off in education, and then once we've established somewhere, we move into workplace at that point. So we're starting to look at workplace in Australia now, actually.
Yeah, very good question. Any other questions? Okay. We're going to finish on time. So,
great, I've got you back on time.
I'd just like to thank Martin for his presentation. It was really, really informative and useful, and I think that bit about that transition from education into employment, sometimes that's where people get stuck and get lost, so I think it's really, really important that to have something like this to take forward is excellent. So I just would like to thank you, Martin, for that, for your presentation. And as Martin says, the presentations will be available on the website as well as in different formats as well. I'd also like to thank the sign language interpreters as well, and the volunteers here today, and for the technical support. So that's our first session over. So it went well, which is great. So
brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I think there's a sort of 15 minutes now for people to get to the other session. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was great, Martin. Thank you.